Good morning. This is the sermon for Sunday, January 2nd. Of course, this is the first Sunday of the new year. And I want us to look at two little sections of two of our scriptures for the day. We're going to look at 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 12. And of course, it's talking about King Solomon. And God says to Solomon when God asks him what he wants, if he could give him anything, Solomon asks for wisdom, and God says, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. And then we look at the gospel, just 3 verses from our gospel lesson, talking about Jesus when he's 12 years old, going with Mary and Joseph to the temple in Jerusalem and staying there after they have left to go home to Nazareth, and Joseph and Mary coming back searching for him for 3 days in Jerusalem. And Jesus says to his mother Mary and to Joseph, "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know that I had to be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. And he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. Now I want us to think about Solomon, number one. Solomon, in a worldly sense, was a great king. Arguably, he was, in a worldly sense, he was the greatest king that Israel ever had from a historical standpoint, and that he was the richest king. His kingdom also extended the farthest of any king of Israel. And he was rather powerful, even though the kingdom of Israel was relatively modest in size. It controlled basically the world's trade routes. And so Solomon had great riches. And Solomon was wise when he was young and asking God for wisdom to be able to rule well over Israel. And God was favored this. But like so many times with us as sinners, Solomon's story is not a very good one. He may be wise, but that doesn't get him very far. He's powerful in a worldly sense, but he's a failure from a godly, spiritual sense, because it's under Solomon that he allows pagan worship to spread in Israel. Solomon himself allows pagan altars and temples to be built in Israel, even for his own wives. He marries pagan wives, and he allows them to worship their gods, even at Jerusalem. And the seeds of he may be wise in many ways, but he doesn't have strong faith. He doesn't love God with all of his heart, soul, mind, and strength. He is, even though he's wise, he's foolish because he's a sinner. And because of his life, in many ways, the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, then go downhill from then. When Solomon dies, the nation of Israel splits in two. There's the southern kingdom of Israel, which is basically just Judah and Benjamin, for the most part, those tribes. And then there's the northern kingdom of Israel, which has the other tribes. So it's the biggest part, and actually the northern kingdom is wealthier than the southern kingdom in history, but they're even more idolatrous and go badly. It's under the northern kingdom that you see Ahab and Jezebel and the other, so many other bad kings. And of course you have bad kings succeeding in Israel, and the people of Israel as a whole turn against God. And a lot of that, not saying that they wouldn't anyway, because we're all sinners, but so much of that begins with Solomon, the wisest person on the earth, the wisest king of Israel. Wisdom and knowledge are not all they're cracked up to be, but we still think they are. We still have this prejudice in the world today, thinking that, well, if we just knew enough, if we were just wise enough and smart enough, all of our problems would be over. No, no, no. Our problem is, number one, sin, and number two, a lack of faith. And that's the problem of Solomon. See, that's the problem with Solomon. So instead, what we need to be focusing on is faith and what? Hope and love. I want you to think about 1 Corinthians 1. There's a couple of scriptures out of 1 Corinthians that are really key for us. Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. It is because of him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God, that is our righteousness, holiness, and redemption. Therefore, as it is written, let the one who boast in the Lord. This is Solomon's problem. He does not love the Lord his God with all of his heart, soul, mind, and strength. He is double-minded or triple-minded. He's wishy-washy at the very least. He's foolish. And that's the way of the world. But you and I, we may not be the smartest people in the world. We may not be the wisest people in the world. But we should strive to be the most faithful or faith-filled people in the world. Our focus needs to be faith, hope, and love, because that's what counts, not knowledge and not earthly wisdom. See, that's what Jesus said. What's the most important commandments? Well, the two most important commandments that sum up all of God's law are love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. And that kind of love, of course, is agape love. It's unconditional love. It's not love that's conditional on anything. See, and that's what the Apostle Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians, isn't it, in chapter 13. And this is a wonderful, wonderful passage, isn't it? If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. Oh boy, that's Solomon, isn't it? He has so much power, so much money, so much wisdom, so much knowledge, but in spite of all that, he's only a resounding gong and a clanging cymbal because of his lack of love and faith in God, his lack in turn of love and faith for his human beings. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. And now these three remain, aren't they? Remain forever. Faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And then also, the Apostle Paul says in Romans 1, the righteous shall live by faith. The righteous we achieve righteousness not through striving to be obedient, because as sinners we cannot be obedient. We're going to foul up, but we shall live by faith, trusting in God's salvation, trusting in his provisions. You know, we're facing the new year, aren't we? This is 2022. And this year, I don't want us to wring our hands. We shouldn't be wringing our hands. We've had a tough couple of years that have passed. Of course, because of COVID-19, but also many other reasons, right? And it's hard maybe for us not to become a little disheartened. And it's hard for us not to view things badly. But just remember, we have to live by faith. And we should always be optimists in God, no matter how bleak things may look. Because I want you to think about it. When the church was first born, many thought the Romans were going to exterminate Christian faith, right? It looked as though they might exterminate the believers, might exterminate the faith. They wanted it done. And there were people probably in that day and age who wrung their hands. Oh, we're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed. Well, no, we're not. No, they weren't. The Christian faith spread and spread and spread, even greater under persecution. Perhaps on a more secular basis, here in America during the Revolutionary War, if you just looked at America versus the greatest nation, greatest empire in the world, Britain, if you looked at that, you would wring your hands and say, oh, America doesn't stand a chance. There's no chance to be independent. There's no chance for the Revolutionary War to succeed. Wrong. It did succeed. And I would suggest to you part of that, I don't want to overblow this because, I don't want to conflate or confuse the two. But yeah, I know, but it's in a way politics. But, part of the reason why the Revolutionary War did succeed, I would suggest to you, was because of the strong Christian faith so much of it was based on. Okay? People had faith and they trusted in God. In China, of course, in the 1960s, there were many in the West here who claimed or thought that Christianity had been completely wiped out. There were no Christians left in China after the Cultural Revolution because of their persecution of Christians. And yet when it opened up, started opening back up to the West, and we discovered there were millions upon millions of Christians. The communists couldn't wipe it out. The Nazis in the 1930s and 40s, it was especially the 40s, the Nazis are going to wipe out all the Jews. And they did do terrible damage, didn't they? They killed 6 million Jews. What a terrible, terrible, terrible tragedy, right? But they didn't succeed in wiping out the Jews, did they? They didn't. God wouldn't let them. You think about communist Russia, an atheist country, and communism there had existed for 70 years, and so many thought, oh yeah, well, communist Russia, it will never be Christian again. Wrong. Today, 70 or 80% of people in Russia profess faith in Jesus Christ. Or related to that, the communists, it looked at for a while there, up until the 1980s, it looked as though communism was spreading all over the globe. Oh no, the West is doomed. Communism is going to take over the West, and it's going to bury the West. Did that happen? No. Instead, communism, or the Iron Curtain, fell. The Soviet Union fell. Thing is that God's in control, and the world isn't in control. Nothing else is. And we need to have, in addition to love is most important. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love God. Second, love your neighbor. But apart from that, we have to have hope and faith. And when we trust in God, we always have hope, because He holds all things in His hand, and all we have to do is have faith in Him. We don't have faith in human institutions. We don't have faith in the human church or the institutional church. We don't have faith in our dysfunctional government. We don't have faith even in each other maybe, but we have faith in God, because God is in control. He has all power. He has a plan, and everything is under control. May that be our focus for 2022. Not on wisdom, not on knowledge, not on the things of this world, but on faith, hope, and love. Amen.